Back here on the Meat Speak podcast, powered by the certified Angus beef brand, sitting in sunny Ohio City, which is officially part of the Cleveland zip code. But let's be real, Ohio City is its own nest in the world of the greater Cleveland dynamic. Sitting across from me is a great friend who, when I first met him, the first job that I knew him, although he is a chef, although he is now an author, was larder master, which is something that I always thought would be fantastic to have on my business card. Chef, author, and a new book that just came out, Koji Alchemy, from Chelsea Green Publishing, Jeremy Umansky. How you doing, sir?
Hello, Brian. What's going on?
Man, I'm just sitting outside your fine establishment, Larder, here on West 29th in Ohio City. And you know, I know the book came out. My copy officially arrived in the mail. You know, the whole worldwide pandemic thing didn't do any favors for getting packages delivered on time. So my official copy of Koji Alchemy showed up, I noticed, about a week later than some of my friends' deliveries. So, but nevertheless, it is here. It is glorious, and we wanted to take some time to really sit down and pick your brain about this subject that I've watched. If you Google Jeremy Umansky on YouTube, there are TED Talks that he's given. There are lots of different speeches that he's given on this strange mold. But man, tell us where it all began in terms of, you know, this is still, I guess, in the big picture, a pretty recent discovery that you've been doing with this.
Yeah, at least, you know, we like to frame it, at least in the Western world, right? Because here in North America and South America and Europe, we're give or take 2,000 years late to the Koji party. So I guarantee anybody listening has a Koji-derived food in their house, and that would be soy sauce. Whether you've got a little packet from, you know, the little takeout spot around the corner, or you got, you know, most of us have several bottles because we buy one, we forget we buy it, and then we buy another one thinking, oh, I'm going to put this marinade on this steak. I need some more soy sauce. So we're all familiar with that. And Koji is the organism responsible for making things like soy sauce, or if you like to drink things like sake or any of the Chinese or Korean style wines. It's responsible for making miso and gochujang and Chinese jang, all these awesome umami-packed foods Koji is responsible for. Literally, somebody could make the argument that a lot of the civilizations throughout Asia and Southeast Asia wouldn't have developed the way they did if it weren't for this mold. It's that important, and we're stoked to be able to use it now.
You know, I want to take a minute. I want to go back to the very beginning. But before we do, we're sitting outside your restaurant, Larder Delicatessen and Bakery, right? Or Larder DB on the Instagram, if you want to follow what's going on here. Koji mold is so prolific. You guys have an entire menu. I mean, how prevalent is the use of this in the dishes that you guys have?
COVID's thrown a wrench in a few things, you know, so our menu is not what it was going back to 2.5 months ago. But generally speaking, I would say at any given time, 65, even 75% of the things that we're making and putting out, from our bread to our cab pastrami, different fermented pickles, these different sauces and umami bomb paste that we make, like, they're in a lot of what we make. The majority of the foods that we're making, we're using Koji in it in one way or another.
Excellent. Well said. One of the foods specifically, although I don't believe it's on, I don't know if it's actually ever been on the menu here, but when I hear you talk about Koji, and I think about at least, you know, the first wow moments was developed around scallops, right?
Yeah. So, I was working with Jonathan Sawyer, and he had wanted me to make some miso, and that was my first introduction to Koji. So I did some research, and at that point, I had already been curing meat and making all different types of ferments and working with wild plants and mushrooms and all that stuff. And I'd been working as a chef for quite a while at that point too. And I had thought I kind of saw it all with this realm of fermented foods, you know. I was doing some really weird, funky things at that point. fermenting out clam guts to make, various liquids to garnish crudos and stuff at the restaurant. And when I was asked to make this miso or this miso-like product, I realized I need this mold. So I had to go through the process of like sourcing it, learning how to grow it, learning how to use it. And after I got comfortable with growing it, I kind of realized I could grow it in ways that all of the classical text about using it said not to do. I was using mushy, overcooked rice to do it, whereas classically you need like perfectly steamed rice that after it's cooked, it still is free-flowing as raw rice is, right? It moves, the kernels don't stick, it's just, perfect more or less. And I was doing the exact opposite, and it was working. So I started thinking one day, like, well, if I can grow this on like busted rice, couldn't I grow it on rice flour or another starch flour? So, I started looking at what the starch composition of rice was and seeing what food Koji preferred and types of rice it liked. And lo and behold, I decided to do this litmus test. And that was if I could pick something that I knew would get screwed up based on the parameters needed to grow this mold, which is relatively high heat, ambient heat, about 90 degrees, and high humidity, 90% relative humidity, maybe even a little more. If I could, dust a scallop with a starch coating and the mold and get it to grow without the food spoiling, I knew I was onto something. And that's exactly what happened. I thought it was going to be a complete failure. But the mold grew and formed this bioprotective layer around the scallop, and it didn't spoil. And right away, we started putting it on the menu. And from there, opened up, well, if it works on this extreme end, charcuterie, the gloves are off. Yeah. Like, let's do it. Let's look at it how it... And Koji's powered by these awesome things called enzymes. Enzymes, a lot of people, especially in the culinary world, don't understand their role or their importance. And enzymes are... Should I wait?
No, you're good. I think we're okay.
Enzymes are really important for flavor creation. Essentially what they are, they're specialized proteins, and what they do is they make our foods more delicious. They also break apart our foods. Like, our body uses them to digest, but in Koji's case, it uses them on the food before you eat it, frees up all these delicious umami compounds and simple sugars and these incredible aromas that come from the different fats present in a given food, and it makes things a million more times delicious than it could ever be on its own. So being able to take advantage of that for charcuterie, for, age accelerating different cuts of meat, we have traditional styles of aging, both wet and dry. This is a whole new, we've got a three-sided coin now, when it comes to this. It's really, we were able to start pushing envelopes in ways that hadn't been pushed before. And that's what's been super, super fun.
Excellent. What if you remember what it was like taking the leap, eating that first scallop? I always think, I'm from Ohio, and so I don't do a lot of seafood. So I look at things through fresh eyes a lot of times. I always think, wonder what was going through the guy's head who ate the first sea scallop or who ate the first oyster, because they don't necessarily look like something you'd want to eat, right? What was that leap of faith like? Do you remember? Do you have any hesitation?
Right. Like eating that first scallop that I left at room temperature and high humidity for 2 days. For me,
there you go.
So what was it like eating that first scallop that I left sit at, 90 degrees and high humidity for 2 days? For me, actually, I didn't even have a second thought about it. It looked good, it smelled good, and I just assumed it would taste good, and it did. Because for me at that point, I had already eaten fish that was 10 years old and fermented out. I had a wonderful experience to eat a style of kimchi called wedding kimchi. So it's a traditional style that's made throughout the Koreas, and when a daughter is born into a family, the family gets together, makes a batch of kimchi that is then gifted to her and her husband on her wedding day. So the one I ate was almost 30 years old and literally had been buried in someone's backyard in Korea for 30 years. So this concept of like this weird kind of gross shit really didn't enter my mind. But I will say, when I went to go feed it to like Jonathan and Brett Sawyer and a few of the other people at Trentina at the time, people were like, okay, they're like, we know you ate it and you're okay, but you eat and make some weird things. So of course you're fine. You've got to promise you're not going to kill any of us. So of course I said, sure, I promise. And everything ended up working out. Yeah, I remember the look on Brett's face. He was just like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I can do this. Like, this is against everything that is telling me that it's okay.
And the rest is history, though, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, if you could talk about, it's one thing to have a mold that you can apply, in this case, to proteins, and it changes the flavor profile. It also has a preservation element to it as well. But from you've said many times, and I've known you for a number of years, about the idea of being able to feed the world really good tasting things. And we've seen this thing go to work in practical applications in things like brajollas and things that generally take a long time to get to their finishing state, to sort of accelerate them. Can you talk about it from that standpoint of not just this is a really cool trick to make things, that you can eat a scallop that's been at room temperature for 2 days, but really the practical application of what you could see this blossoming into over time?
Yeah, so I think some historical context is important for this. And what we have to think about is, let's look at the soybean, one of the things that this mold was originally grown on. And fresh soybeans, are slightly toxic to us, much like kidney beans are, that sort of thing, right? We have to cook them a certain way to flush those toxins out. So they have the potential to poison you pretty well, or pretty badly, I should say. And they're not that they're nutrient dense, but a lot of the nutrients aren't bioavailable, meaning your body can't break them apart and make good use of them when you digest them. So Koji comes along, and it's able to do this. It's able to take something that's mildly toxic and is not very agreeable for our digestion and our nutrition, and completely flip it around and make it ridiculously dense and bioavailable nutrients, and create a level of deliciousness and umami. I mean, literally, you eat a little bit of miso, like a fingertip of miso, that same umami that you get off of like a fire-grilled steak, that level of umami is there. And we're talking a bean to a cut of meat. Yeah. So the transformative ability and properties of this is just absolutely stunning. So when we look at how can we go ahead, see, I'm a firm believer that good food is an inalienable right, that everybody should have access to good food. And when we say good, we don't just mean like foie gras and caviar, right? We mean food that's nutrient dense and bioavailable nutrients, food that's accessible, it's priced good, and that the people selling it are also making a good wage doing that. These are the things that we talk about when we say good food. So all around, we have these great win-win-win partnerships. That's the goal. So when we can use something like Koji to take cuts of meat that may be typically too tough or undesirable because a lot of work has to go into cooking them, and or a lot of knowledge has to go into being able to how to work with them, right? And we can use Koji, we can use its enzymes to not only create delicious flavors in there, but also as these enzymes work, they literally on a physical level start to break apart and tenderize things too. So we're able to take like tough offcuts, undesirable cuts, and make them extremely delicious, and also make them more tender, so they're more mass appeal. And in doing that, with little investment, we can create more fair access to these nutrient dense foods. I mean, the nutrient density of something like beef is fantastic. I mean, fats, proteins, and there are minimal carbohydrates in there. But things that are really important for our nutrition, we can really get out of these foods if people have good access to them. And being able to use Koji to do this versus industrial chemicals or, at various other things that people have attempted, adding fillers and wood pulp to salamis and all sorts of stuff. Like, no, we don't need any of this. We can very inexpensively and with minimal effort look at ways that we can scale this up and provide fair access to these foods across the board. And that's something that we feel is like super, super important, being able to do that.
Well said, man. Well said. One of the things that I want to make sure we spend a good amount of time on here is the book itself. It seems like, I get the...
It's crazy.
It's amazing. It's amazing. I get the pleasure of getting to bring a lot of folks to Cleveland, right? Certified Angus beef. We're 40 minutes south of Cleveland. Cleveland is home to us, and so I have so many chefs that come in that actually request, do we get to go hang out with Jeremy at Larder? And true to form, you guys have been open for 2 years. You've gotten 2 James Beard nominations, which is certainly nothing to sneeze at.
No.
But tell me about the book itself. A lot of folks are coming here wanting to pick your brain. Renowned chefs around the country coming here to pick your brain, to better understand what all this is about.
No, you're putting me on the spot now. I'm blushing the color of that stool over there. So really quick, I'm going to read a little excerpt from this book. So there's one of the things we looked at in this book is we wanted to build community around Koji. And so we have 40 different contributors, everybody from PhD researchers to chefs to small-scale fermenters to Koji spore producers in Japan have contributed. And one of my favorites is in this aging meat and charcuterie chapter. And lo and behold, it's Diana Clark, the beef maven.
Frequent podcast contributor.
Frequent contributor. She's a bovine anatomist. She's awesome. And she wrote this great essay for us. It's called Koji Compared with Traditional Aged Meats. And I'm just the intro here. It says, how do we know that Koji aged meats can compete with traditional dry aged meats? Well, we tested them with Diana Clark, a scientist and bovine anatomist, who for many years has worked with certified Angus beef. So Diana goes on to talk about the merits of looking at Koji to age foods and being able to do it on these great economic scales that, compared to traditional ways of aging, it can create a product that goes to market quicker. And anytime you do that without sacrificing quality, which means, texture, appearance, flavor, deliciousness when it comes to food, without sacrificing those things, that's a huge win and opens it up for a wider variety of people to be able to access it. This book was like a huge undertaking because as much as we love cab, we talk about using this with vegetables. We talk about using this with dairy and eggs and all sorts of things. There's so many awesome things that you can make with Koji. I think one of the things we get when you guys come by and you bring a group of people in, one of the things that always raises quite a few eyebrows and we get a few oh my goshes from is our pastrami essence, which my business partner Kenny Scott hates the name pastrami essence, but
it's a cologne.
When I was developing this product, I was like, this is the essence of pastrami. And then I had this flash in my head of a horrible cologne ad from the late 80s or early 90s, just pastrami essence and this beautiful woman and chiseled guy just rubbing pieces of pastrami on their bodies and smelling each other. I think it'd be fantastic.
It's primordial.
Yes, so extremely sensual. But we're able to take a byproduct, the steaming liquid from the pastrami, which has bits of spices and little bits of brisket that fall off on it. We're able to mix that with Koji that's grown on rice or barley and salt, and we create an amino sauce that rivals almost any soy sauce I've ever had and any Worcestershire sauce I've ever had. And so a lot of chefs come in and we're like, well, this is something that you pour down the drain. And they're like, yes, we pour this down the drain. put a bottle down. We tell them we charge $9 for it, and their jaw drops. And then they open it and they smell it and they taste it, and they're like, "This is like liquid pastrami gold. Like you could sprinkle this on fries instead of malt vinegar because it's got a little tang to it the way we ferment it." You can garnish a baked potato with it. You could marinate a steak in it. You could brine your pastrami in it. We've made vinaigrettes with it for salads. Like the use of it is just so broad and fantastic. And seeing that we can use koji to manipulate it in this way, using traditional methods at that too. Yeah. We don't have roto-evaporators and ultrasonic homogenizers here and that sort of thing. Like, as much as I'd love some of that equipment, we don't have it. We use traditional means to produce these foods. So it's really cool seeing people get into it and really see, the proof in that pudding, like what koji can do.
Yeah, that's wild. How about talk to us about even the procurement of koji? I know Chef Gavin Pinto, who is also on the podcast every so often, works for Certified Angus Beef. He's very much riding the koji train. I think he gets his koji from Amazon. So if somebody is looking to kind of get started, where do you send them?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because you can plug in at any level that's appropriate for you. So if you're someone, and the interesting thing is too, like this book, the way we wrote it, my co-author Richard, she and I, the way we wrote it, the way we wanted to approach this was culinary professionals, like seasoned chefs who've been doing this for decades, have about the same amount of koji knowledge that someone who has never heard of koji has. Because it's just, people aren't familiar with it. We're familiar with some of the things that are made from it, but we don't ask any chef how they make soy sauce. And they'll say, oh, they're fermented soybeans, but there's a lot more to it, So we wanted this book to have this broad appeal for both professionals, home enthusiasts, and people new to the fold. Anybody that had an interest in it. So with that said, you can order spores from a producer in Japan, or domestically there's Gem Cultures. They're a company out of the West Coast. I believe it's San Francisco. They sell the spores, which is kind of like the seed of the koji. And you can get those, and you can sprinkle them on cooked rice or barley or virtually any starchy medium and grow your own. You can get, like Chef Gavin's getting, these dried blocks of koji inoculated rice. You can find those on Amazon, or a Japanese specialty market, or even some Korean or Chinese specialty markets. You can also online find these pre-made base koji products, and the two most prevalent are amazake, which is if you add yeast to amazake, you then have sake, or any of the other styles of Asian alcohols. Or shio koji, which is kind of like amazake, but it has salt in it. These are kind of like porridges. And they've got all the flavor of koji and all these active enzymes that will transform your food in them. So you can get those pre-made, or you can make your own. There's all these different ways you can jump in. We did a demo a little bit ago that was like, well, how does someone who has no reference for this, no experience in this, they want to make something like miso, what do they do? So we sourced some pre-grown koji from Amazon, and we opened up some canned beans and had some table salt, and it was that easy. Yeah. Like, mix it together and then forget about it for a few months to a few years, depending on what your goal is. So it's really easy, and what you have to think about too is people with far less understanding of the science, the technique, and the method behind producing this, with very little access to technology, both, when I say technology, I mean the flow of information, right? Looking something up with your computer in your pocket, your phone. Also refrigeration technologies and this sort of thing that helps us keep our food safe. People without any of this have been working with this mold for thousands of years. I mean, there's archaeological evidence that puts it back over 9,000 years in northern China. And it most likely predates that by a couple thousand years. We just don't have the concrete evidence for that yet. So it's been used for a long time by people at one point that had no idea what they were doing. So you can do it at home. Like, it's that
You have
simple.
a refrigerator even, just in case.
That, it's really easy. There's great ways to plug in, and the book is full of information. The book, we wanted people to be comfortable with the mold and learn how to grow it and then use it. So we don't necessarily address, there's a couple mentions of like sourcing pre-made Koji products, but the goal of this book was to teach you how to make your own. So we do have some resources in there for finding the pre-made things and, working with them. But it's so easy to plug in any way you want to.
Well said. I guess in addition to the book, and it's funny that it came out when it did, and I don't know if funny is necessarily the right word, but of course, book release party was planned and all these things.
We can use the word funny.
It's not too soon anymore.
It's both laugh out loud and ha ha funny.
Well, you knew when the date was coming. It was here, and then of course, the entire world kind of shut down.
Yeah.
Everybody has had to kind of navigate the last 2.5 months in their own way. And can you tell us a little bit about how you guys have been dealing with it in general? And then, has the book release just kind of been a nice, maybe a nice distraction or a nice reminder of normalcy when it did come out?
So, based on like some of the things that my co-author Rich and I have been hearing from people, is that this has been such a welcome distraction. So many of my colleagues are out of work or scrambling to keep work right now. A lot of them have come out and said, like, this book has like given me something to do and keep my mind off all the crud that's going on now with COVID. The sleepless nights I've been having trying to figure out how to pivot my business, like making miso is super relaxing. I used your book to make some. It was a hell, like, I'm literally hearing these things on a daily basis, and it's been incredibly flattering, and I'm so grateful that people have been able to use it as this. We're also noticing, people have some more time at home. Both, chefs in the food industry and cooks and dishwasher, everybody, servers, everybody. But, people who are work from home and have office jobs and that sort of thing. So I've been hearing from wide swaths of people who are like, this has actually come at a fairly good time for me. This is something I've been wanting to get into for a while, and I actually have a little bit of time to do it. It's relaxing. I end up with really cool and delicious things for me and my family. I'm going to be able to port all these back to my restaurant once we get up and running the way we need to be. Like, we're getting a lot of positive feedback. So, as I said, like, it's ha-ha funny and laugh out loud funny kind of at the same time, right? We're good and bad put together makes gray, we're all in this weird gray area. So it's been interesting, to say the least. I'm just, and Rich and I talked about this at great length last night, actually, with somebody. We're just super grateful that this book can be bringing pleasure to some people that may not have it right now, Yeah. That's the whole goal of like Koji building community. Right, coalescing around something that like strengthens all of us and pushes us all to be creative and inventive and do better and be self-sufficient and secure in what we're doing too. Yeah. That's a huge thing. Like the food sovereignty, pardon me, the food sovereignty, the control that Koji gives you to create the most delicious and nutritious food ever is unparalleled. And something like that as a civil right, as a civil liberty, is just fantastic. And to be able to have more control than ever, I think is a fantastic thing.
Glorious. Well said. Let's get to the most important thing, right? Tell us, where can they get the book?
So first and foremost, we like to tell people to support their local bookseller. No matter where you are, give them a call, search them out in Google. Some of them in various places around may still be closed to the public, but behind the scenes they're able to like order you a book and ship it to you. So check them out. There's also the big ones like Barnes & Noble and Target and Amazon you can also get. We're getting a bunch of copies here at Larder, so anybody in the Cleveland area can stop in here. And also directly through the publisher. The people at Chelsea Green Publishing are awesome. It's a small employee-owned publisher. They use recycled paper and all these just wonderful things. They're in idyllic Vermont. Pardon me. So it's there's a lot of ways you can get it. Whatever works for you, go for it. There's also an ebook too. So if you happen to be somewhere where you can't get shipping or that sort of thing, you can get the Kindle version or the Nook version, whatever it is.
Excellent. Can I make a request?
Please.
I would like an audiobook, and I would like it to be read by your business partner and co-chef, Kenny Scott.
We can do that. We can do that.
With no bleeps or edits or anything like that. Just turn him loose.
Yes. Yes.
One last thing, just because, I mean, to flip through this book and to look at the page with all the forwards on. I mean, what a list of people who have lent their name to the credibility of the book. Everybody from Dan Barber to Danielle Ballou to our good buddy Rick Tremano in Chicago. I mean, even now, I mean, do you look at that and think, holy cow, this is a pretty, I mean, do you ever just catch yourself just looking at that thinking like, okay, this is real cool?
I think we should use the bleep button. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I could have never imagined. But it's just, pardon me. It's just a testament of, how impactful Koji can be, I mean, that's what it boils down to. And it's just, Rich and I with that, we're just over the moon. I mean, it's just mind-blowing.
It's very, very, very impressive. Jeremy Umansky from Larder Delicatessen and Bakery here in Ohio City, just across the Cuyahoga River from the land, right? But do please check out Koji Alchemy. It's funny. Alchemy is one of those words that I actually ended up Googling it. It's one that I've always heard of, but as I was getting ready to talk to you, I thought, I don't actually know exactly what alchemy means. And one of the words that kept coming up was magic. And when you really think about everything around Koji and food and the works that you guys are doing, it really is magical. And its impact on the food, its impact on society, its impact on the world. I guess, having the long view of things, which is one of the things I've always appreciated you coming from. I mean, you've run a farm in upstate New York. I mean, you've had all these different experiences to shape you. I guess what is a message that you can put out there for folks who maybe are beginning to, hopefully, fingers crossed, come out of what's been going on the last 2 months, Koji related or non-Koji related?
Just do what you can to strengthen yourself and your community. That's it. And don't be afraid to ask for help at any time. Your neighbors, a stranger, the great people at CAB, we all have to work together to come out of this. So that's what needs to be done. That's it. Hang in there, take a deep breath, do whatever you can, and ask for help when you need it.
Excellent. Well said, Jeremy Umansky. Larder, I don't know, can we shake hands? We need a fist bump. I mean, I don't know what protocol is.
We've got hand sanitizer.
That's right. If this is your first time tuning into the Meat Speak podcast powered by the certified Angus beef brand, know that you can find it across Google Play, Apple, Spotify, or by visiting certifiedangusbeef.com/ podcast. So, Jeremy Umansky, Larder Delicatessen and Bakery, 2-time James Beard nominee and author of Koji Alchemy, which you can find across most of your major book platforms. Thanks for taking time, brother.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.